Awesome. Hello, Gayla Kessler. Welcome, Green Party members. I myself am so excited to be here tonight to host this town hall with Anna Keenan, and I'm excited to see where this goes. And it's so important that we gather and we talk and we share ideas, and this is a part of it. I just want to first acknowledge that I am on the Coast Salish territories on southern Vancouver Island, and these are lands that have been taken care of by our ancestors and the people, and our connection to the land is something so important, and this is something that the Green Party shares, a care for the land and the people. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of what tonight holds for us. And we're going to have an introduction from the host from Anna. So that will be about 10 minutes long. And then we'll have a question and answer period. And at the end of it, I'll let Anna know when we have about 1 minute left. And now, next on our list, on our agenda, is some housekeeping. Just so everybody knows who wasn't here last night for Jonathan, there's interpretation. So on the bottom of our screens, on the bottom right, you can click, it says language interpretation available. Click here to get started. You can click there and you can hear our lovely transcribers transcribing everything from us, for us. So the chat is closed, so everybody knows, but we will have an area open to ask questions. Anything that comes, anything that hits you that you really want answered. This is like a spirit calling, I like to say, anything that just like an inspiration when you're listening to Anna speak and you're hit by inspiration and you have a question, ask those questions. And the moderators will do such a good job to try to get those questions out. And then just another reminder, to be respectful in your questions, and the candidates and the moderators and staff. And I just remembered that I didn't introduce myself. My name is Gayla Kessler, Nugo Rainbow Eyes. I'm a member of the Danakdao Awitlala First Nation. I came to Fairy Creek, and then Fairy Creek elders led me into the Green Party. And I met Amita Kuttner and connected deeply. And now I get to be here with everybody helping to moderate, which is beautiful because that's what we did at Fairy Creek. We connected with each other, we connected with our elders, and we communicated, ask questions, get connected. That's what we have to do, and this is what it is. So thank you, everybody. We have 75 people on right now. Thank you all for coming on. It's so important. So I think that's all for my introduction. I think we can pass it over to Anna.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rainbow Eyes. As I was saying to Rainbow Eyes before everybody else came on, I'm a big fan of Rainbow Eyes from across the other side of the country here in Ipequit, also known as Prince Edward Island. So I was really delighted that the two of us were paired up for this town hall tonight. Merci d'être ici avec nous, tout le monde. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous et j'attends votre question et j'ai hâte à donner mes réponses à mes meilleurs. So Epcheladik from Epiquit, as I mentioned before, also known as Prince Edward Island. This is one of the 7 districts of Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I personally grew up half a world away from here on the land of the Turrbal people in Australia. And I studied physics and economics at university. And through that work, I became more and more aware of the climate crisis. I started doing climate science communication to the public through Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. And at the end of university, I faced a choice. I could have gone on to do a PhD in climate science, but I knew that no matter how good a climate scientist I might become, it wasn't going to matter if politicians continued to ignore the excellent science that scientists were producing. So at that stage, I moved into advocacy. That was 15 years ago. And in those 15 years, I've now worked on 4 continents for people-powered movement-building organizations, helping to build skilled networks of activists. J'ai travaillé pour motiver et organiser les gens afin qu'ils additionnent leur force et leur talent pour réaliser les changements qu'ils souhaitent, ce qui peut sembler impossible s'ils agissent seuls. Et c'est l'une des raisons pour lesquelles je suis fière de travailler avec Keenan-Walcott et de défendre l'idée d'une co-chefferie ou une chefferie partagée pour le Parti Vert. I'm really delighted to be working alongside Keenan-Walcott on this campaign and advancing a co-leadership model. You might have seen our campaign website, the Keenan-Walcott.ca site. Chad and I share a commitment to grassroots democracy and activist empowerment. We've both been around the Green Party for years now, and we're both bringing forward professional experience as communicators and influencers. And I feel just really privileged and overjoyed to be working alongside someone in a true partnership like this. And I see that he's present in the participants list today. So hi, Chad. For the story of how I ended up in Canada, as an Australian youth climate activist, I went to the UN climate talks in 2007. That's where I first met Elizabeth May. But I also met a very tall and handsome young Canadian youth climate activist and fell deeply in love. And he's from Prince Edward Island. This is where he grew up. So he brought me back here. But after meeting at the UN climate talks in Europe, we stayed there living in the Netherlands for 5 further years. And it was there that I really developed a passion for sustainable urban design and active transportation, with those famous Dutch bike paths everywhere. I experienced firsthand what it's like to live in a social democratic country that really prioritizes community well-being most highly, and that has the courage to regulate sectors of the economy using the law to keep the economy regulated and under democratic control so that the economy serves the good of the people and not the other way around, with people serving the economy. J'ai passé 5 ans à Greenpeace International en tant que responsable de campagne sur le climat et l'énergie, et 4 années au sein de l'Organisation pour la justice climatique 350.org ou 350.org. J'ai également été présidente du Parti Vert de l'île de Prince-Édouard pendant 2 ans, afin de diriger l'équipe dans le cadre d'un processus de planification stratégique, d'alignement et de renforcement des capacités qui a permis au parti de se préparer à son succès ultérieur. Since gaining my Canadian citizenship in 2018, I've now run federally 2 times. I placed 2nd in my rural riding of Molpec in 2019 with 26% of the vote. And in 2021, I achieved the 4th strongest result for a Green anywhere in the country. I do have to acknowledge what my home province has been through in the last month. Our household was, until yesterday, actually, 19 days after Hurricane Fiona passed, without grid connected power. So, you know, this is the first webinar that I've done in my own office since having our household power reconnected. We were nearly 3 weeks without electricity, and I'll be honest, that's been really hard. This natural disaster, like floods, wildfires, droughts, and heat waves in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, was forecast by climate science. We know that North Atlantic hurricanes will get stronger over time. And for me, living through it has really put into sharp focus the need for climate action and the need for reform of our really antiquated and overly centralized electricity system. The people I know who just had a normal last 3 weeks are those people who are living off-grid with solar and battery backup and who have that decentralized energy set up already. Mais aussi, cette crise climatique a également mis en lumière les inégalités économiques existantes et les problèmes d'isolement social. Les personnes qui étaient déjà sans abri ou les personnes âgées, les personnes handicapées, qui disposent de revenus fixes insuffisants et vivent dans les logements insalubres sont celles qui ont le plus souffert. People who were already living life on the financial edge, they can't afford a generator and the $50 of fuel that goes through that generator every day. The cost of buying an extra mobile phone data package for a week, or the cost of having a tree fall through your roof, or even just the cost of replacing the contents of a fridge or freezer when it spoils, when the electricity has gone off. These impacts can cause cascading financial stress and tip people over the edge. The costs of climate change are stark, and the economic inequalities are even further highlighted when we enter these crises. The Green Party, in my mind, is the only party that simultaneously advocates for action on the climate crisis and action for social and economic justice, and we connect the two to each other. This is why Canada needs the Greens at this moment in history. And this is why Canada needs us to be a strong and united party. Il est temps pour nous de traduire les forces de notre parti en résultats électoraux et en sièges au Parlement. With more seats in the House of Commons, we can drive the changes that are so desperately needed and which no other party in Canadian politics, it seems, has the courage to lead. Canada needs Greens and needs us now, because we are out of time for timid solutions, timid people, and timid political efforts. We have to rebuild the sacred connection to our neighbors in our communities, the sacred connections to the earth, to our Mother Earth. We can and we must safeguard the integrity of our ecological systems instead of just narrow-mindedly focusing on economic growth at any cost, and it really is at any cost. We can build a modern and sustainable and balanced economy where everyone can get by, where everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home. Nous pouvons écouter l'avis d'experts. Nous pouvons valoriser la qualité à long terme et le succès pour tous, plus que le profit individualisé, bon marché et rapide. Pour sortir de cette ère de crises multiples, le climat, la santé, le logement, l'économie, la santé mentale, la crise de déconnexion sociale, pour sortir de cette ère de crise, nous devons changer le mode de pensée qui nous a mis dans cette situation. Et les valeurs vertes sont le changement dont nous avons besoin. I am so deeply grateful for the generations of Greens who have come before us, who have always resisted the politics of individualism, of extractivism, of social exclusion, and materialistic overconsumption. Those Greens who have instead championed the values of community, sustainability, inclusion, and active citizenship. La bonne nouvelle, c'est que les valeurs vertes trouvent aujourd'hui un écho profond auprès des jeunes qui comprennent dans leur chair tout ce qui a été perdu et ce qu'ils risquent de perdre en futur si la tendance de la crise sans fin se poursuit. Il n'y a pas beaucoup de champions de l'économie néolibérale parmi les moins de 40 ans. Now is the time to move into the post-capitalist economy of care. And this feels inevitable to me. It's the well-being economy and it's on its way. We Greens and the up-and-coming generations too are proud to go slow, to plan for the long term, to do things right the first time instead of rushing and taking shortcuts, to listen to evidence instead of jumping to conclusions, to aim for quality over quantity, to listen to each other instead of fighting and excluding. I've spent my whole career overcoming cynicism, this belief that, oh, what's the point of trying because we're powerless to change anything. Et ce que je vois autour de moi, c'est que la communauté verte réussit à créer le changement chaque jour, me prouvant chaque jour que là, si on s'engage, il y a encore beaucoup d'espoir pour l'avenir. There is a lot to change, and Chad Walcott and I believe in our capacity to change it. We are ready to step up into this leadership role, to renew the party, to take responsibility and take the party to its next level, and to get real results for people and planet. So merci, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Anna, that was so beautiful. Let's make change. Let's do it. I'm ready. So many people are ready. We got to do it. There's a fire for it. So our first question that we have is, how do you plan to bring together different factions within the party to build a sense of shared purpose?
I love this question. Cool. I think I'm going to love all of the questions tonight, actually. How do we bring together different factions within the party? Now, factions is a strong word. I think there are different groups within the party that have slightly different visions or directions. And I think that that's okay. To me, the word faction indicates that those groups are like fighting against each other and are vying for dominance, or they're trying to suppress each other. And I want to discourage that sort of factional behavior or factionalism. I think people can take pride in their identity and their philosophies. And we need to be able to talk to each other and respect each other and respect that there is diversity within this party. So broadly, I've sort of looked at the way that people describe themselves within the party. I see people who call themselves eco-socialists. I see people who call themselves like classical environmentalists. I see people who call themselves, intersectional progressives. And then of course there's a strong, Indigenous activist community within the Green Party as well. And people who don't sit within any of those sort of self-defined boxes. And I have deep respect for everybody who's coming from all of those different groups. I want to make sure that the Green Party is a place for you to feel at home. I want to help us talk to each other. I want all those different groups to bring forward policy proposals to convention, hash it out, have the disagreements, have the discussion at policy convention, use the policy process to advance green policy. And then when it comes to election time, let's all work together. Let's focus on getting Greens elected. And I think that different parts of the country are ready for different approaches too. What works in my rural riding here at Molpec or in Parry Sound, Muskoka, a conservative riding in Ontario is probably very different than what's going to work in the Plateau in Montreal or downtown Vancouver. And so we need to recognize that diversity is a good thing. It lets us appeal to different groups within the Canadian population. So I want to empower all groups. I want everyone to feel like they have a home.
Awesome, beautiful. I love it what you said about the factions. We have to get rid of that. It seems like a very cultural thing for us, culturally for Indigenous people, that we just, no, it's all one. We're all one community. We all work together. So I really love that. Sorry, my cat is meowing at the door, so I'm going to apologize if she starts meowing really loud.
No worries, it's fun.
The next question is, how specifically do you plan to develop the grassroots base of the party and its role in directing the party and its decision making?
Cool. These are great questions. Chad and I have a very strong focus on grassroots activism. I think there's already a lot that local district associations can do, and I want to focus on that. There's very little that is currently holding a district association back from taking leadership, and that's what I've found in my own writing. You're able to organize, you're able to take a lot of initiative, but there's very little sort of active support or training for district associations that is provided. And sometimes it's very difficult to find how to input to the policy process because we keep reinventing what the policy process is. So I'm actually very pleased that we're moving towards an annual model of general meetings, which I think will give more predictability and the sort of, a 4 seasons annual cycle that people can get used to, because we have seemed to sort of reinvent the policy process and do a bespoke model every 2 years for these biennial general meetings. So I want there to be a predictable national policy process that districts can plug into, and I want to do capacity building at the grassroots all across the country. Chad and I have put out a 6-month plan. I encourage everyone to visit our website. I'll actually just pull up the link here. I think I can use the chat, but not everybody else can. But have a look at our 6-month plan. One of the third point in our 6-month plan is an investment in a new capacity building program for electoral district associations. We want to find at least 60 ridings across the country that can run high ambition campaigns, and we want to invite them all to nominate 3 or 4 real leaders, including 1 young person under 30, to advance, to grow their skills, to be trained by the best of the best campaigners that the Green Party has to offer across the country, and put those lessons into practice in their district associations now, 2.5 years ahead of the next predicted election in 2025. We can't just fail to use this time in between elections. Now is the time to invest in building our capacity. If we want to win 12 seats at the next election, we need to expand dramatically the number of ridings that we're running high ambition campaigns in. If we run high ambition campaigns in only 12 ridings, we'll probably only win 3 or 4. If we want to win 12, we need to run high ambition campaigns in 60 ridings. And that I've had some feedback that sounds naive, because we really should just target to win just a narrow 5 ridings. But I think now is the time to build capacity, and then at the next election we can assess, okay, what's the resource that we've got and how can we focus it. But let's not limit ourselves now by limiting our imagination. I'd rather aim big and achieve half of my goals than to aim small and succeed.
Awesome. Yeah, we want to dream. Let's dream big. Yeah. Next question. How long have you known your running partner? And next part, what projects have you worked on together? What did you learn about the other?
I love this question. Great, cool. So Chad and I have known each other for, I think we could say that we've known each other just sort of as acquaintances in the general green space for a few years. We sort of encountered each other in online discussions in some of the green member Facebook groups, but never really had personally met. But it was at the end of last year, people had started encouraging me to consider putting my name forward for the leadership. And I felt like, I knew that my French was not at a sufficient level to really serve the francophone community. Et je vous donne le respect à la communauté francophone. Je suis une francophile, mon fils va dans une école acadienne ici, et il a 6 ans et j'apprends le français avec lui, mais c'est juste un fait que l'apprentissage français prend le temps. Et j'ai fait beaucoup de progrès le dernier été, mais peut-être ça va être un autre 1 ou 2 ans pour achever le niveau C expert. Je suis seulement intermédiaire maintenant. So I knew that I wanted to work with somebody who could serve the francophone community at a native level. And I also knew that co-leadership had many other advantages. And Chad and I had actually talked about the model of co-leadership before. He had been looking into it in the Quebec Greens. I was familiar with it from the Green parties in Europe and in New Zealand. And I actually reached out to Elizabeth May in January. This is back when she wasn't considering running. And I said, I'm considering running on a co-leadership platform. Do you have any advice for me? And she said, I would speak to these and these people in the Scottish Greens and the Greens of England and Wales, and I'd be happy to introduce you to those people. And she also asked me, how would this work under the party's constitution? I said, well, our plan would be that we would run, and if one of us wins in the leadership race, we would appoint the other as deputy. So that's how it works in the current model. We're both running for the individual leader position, but we can appoint a deputy. But over time, we would work with the membership to reform the constitution to make space for co-leadership in the same way that the Green parties in other parts of the world do that. So anyway, to answer the original question, when this was at the turn of the year, I knew that I wanted to reach out to a Quebec Green and work in co-leadership. So I asked around friends in the Quebec Greens, and many of them were pointing me in the direction of Keenan-Walcott. So reached out, had conversations. We vetted each other, to see if we aligned on some of the more controversial issues, and talked about our approach to leadership. And it just has been a very natural partnership since that time. We tested working together early on in facilitating some plenary sessions in the last virtual general meeting. And I think this campaign has been the biggest project, and it's going really well along with our campaign manager, Ryan. I think we've got a really positive culture in our team and all our fabulous volunteers. I think we've got about 30 or 40 volunteers that are active on the campaign so far, and we're having just a really positive time. So I think that answers the question.
Perfectly. Awesome. Yeah, because it's true. It's about a community. Joint leadership, I think, is such a beautiful thing that the Green Party is doing. I love it so much. And I think a lot of, the First Nations across Canada would agree with it as well. It's the way forward.
Yeah. It's, I will add that, Chad and I have had like 2 disagreements so far, and by being co-leaders and committing to like really needing to agree before moving on with things, I think we've gone through those discussions. We've committed to keeping the relationship primary and knowing that we're stronger together. And so we've worked through it and achieved consensus and come to better outcomes than we would have if either one of us was working on our own. And we've also set up mechanisms for resolving disagreements if we really can't work through it. But so far we've been able to work through those disagreements that we've had, and it's actually deepened our trust in each other and made us even more of a genuine partnership.
I'm so happy you said that. We have to learn how to disagree. It's so important. I love it. Yeah, it's how we move forward. So Anna, how do you envision the future of rural regions within Canada, and what can the Green Party do to show that it understands the issues of rural voters and become a new political home for them?
Thank you. So I mentioned earlier that I live in a rural riding. I am calling you now from my office that is in a 125-year-old farmhouse that we've gradually renovated. We're on a 90-acre property. There's 50 acres of woods in the back, and then farmers' fields, an orchard, gardens, etc. So my riding is primarily a rural and agricultural riding. If any of you have eaten potatoes today, you might have eaten them, they might have been grown close to me. But some of the big challenges, so for one, I think one way to show that Greens are relevant to rural voters is electing rural leaders. And one of the great things about Chad and I, our partnership, is that Chad is based in Montreal in a big city, and I'm based in a rural riding. And so we actually bring those perspectives together. I did find as a rural Green in the 2020 leadership race that agricultural issues were largely not addressed, and issues of land use. And so I am glad to be able to bring those forward. We do have challenges in rural areas about services being increasingly centralized, arguably for cost efficiency, into urban centers. So we lose our local medical clinics, they close our post offices, we get more and more small businesses closing because they can't compete with the big box stores that are on the outskirts of town. There's more and more centralization of education services, and that sense of rural community starts to disappear the more that those services are sort of centralized away into the big cities. But Greens are also the party of small business. I think we can speak about the values of keeping communities connected, of having 15-minute communities, keeping local small towns vibrant so that people don't need to travel 3 and 4 hours to the nearest big city. We can talk about agricultural, corporate monopolies that control agricultural production and that control land. We can talk about reforestation as well, is a really important aspect. But there are a lot of farmers out there who are really suffering for a lack of just financial sustainability, let alone environmental sustainability on their farms, and particularly farmers who are wanting to do the right thing and to care for the land. They are forced to compete against corporate or industrial agriculture that is driving down quality and is driving down price. And so sometimes there are farmers who are turning over millions and millions of dollars worth of product every year, but they're spending millions and millions of dollars as well, and that the margins that they're making are tiny. So mental health and stress in agricultural communities is very significant. Farmers have a very high rate of suicide. I went to the National Farmers it was the Farmers Union, National Farmers Union AGM in my area a few years ago, and the only flyer that was there from the government was mental health support for farmers. And to me, that was this recognition that agricultural communities are in crisis, and we need to not see agricultural communities as the enemy. They are part of the climate solution. We need to be bringing forward and also the biodiversity solution. We need to be supporting farmers to be doing the right thing, to be using their land well, to be rehabilitating their land, to be investing in soil carbon, all of these critically important things. And we need people who are, I would really like to elevate the voices of those rural Greens. I know that we have a lot of farmers and agriculturalists within the party, and I don't see Conservatives or Liberals or the NDP really truly addressing these issues in a strong way. So I think there's a lot that we can do to talk about agriculture, to talk about land use, to talk about the importance of local decentralized rural economies. That's just a smattering of of my thoughts on rural Canada.
That's so wonderful. Thank you, Anna. We'll go to the next question, which is, how do you plan to unify the party with the goal to bring diverse and marginal groups to the party?
Cool. I think that we already, as Greens, attract we attract a huge number of young people and people from all sorts of diverse backgrounds. But unfortunately, in the last few years, I have seen people from marginalized backgrounds say, I don't feel safe in the party, and then they leave. And how can we grow the party if people are coming to us and then deciding to leave again? If we want to grow, we need to make sure that we're welcoming and integrating and creating a safe home for all those people who come to us. And then once we've got that stability, then we can keep inviting more people. It's pointless to just try to keep inviting more people if we're also leaving. It's also a principle of fundraising. You know, you've got recruitment, but then you have retention as well, is an equally important thing to invest in. And I think that we can keep we can make it a safe space for people to want to stay with the party if they feel like they'll be respected, that if they have complaints or concerns, that they will be heard, that if they're being harassed or bullied, that people who are bullying them will be held to account and given feedback and given an opportunity to change. And if the behavior is repeated and repeated, that there is strong boundaries that are set to create those safe spaces to say, no, we will not accept this behavior within the party. And I always say it's a boundary against harmful behavior. It's not a boundary against people. If people are capable of changing their behavior to include others and make them feel safe, then and I believe that everybody is capable of learning and changing, then we can create those safe spaces. But I look around the party and I see diversity everywhere. I think we've always done a great job of creating a safe space for women within the party. If you look at the leadership debates over the last 20 years, I think Elizabeth May and Annamie Paul have been the only women on the debate stage nationally, and they're both Green women. We often have more than 50% participation of women in Green Party spaces, which I think is great. But I think we do have a lot of work to do on racial justice. It's been clear if you look at the profile of our candidates in 2019, that we have not had a lot of racial diversity. It does not reflect the Canadian population. And I think that that's something that we need to be aware of and to work on. And we need to listen to the experience of candidates of color and Indigenous candidates. And when they're giving feedback about what needs to change to make the space safer for them, we need to then act on that feedback and make the changes necessary. And that's how we grow diversity within the party.
Beautiful, thank you, Anna. That was a good question, and it's my job to be neutral, so I'll try not to let it curb my enthusiasm for this experience. So I believe that those were all the questions that have been sent in, and we're now going to move on to the questions that have been put into the chat. I find the co-leadership approach fantastic and progressive, but how will you put it into practice in our system? Will your leadership partner take part in the French debates?
Thank you for the question. That question is really up to the media organizations. So we will advocate to media organizations that one of us could participate in English language debate, one could participate in French debates, but it really depends on whether the media organizations would allow that. If you look at Quebec Solidaire, they're a party in Quebec at the provincial level, for those who aren't aware, and they have co-leaders or co-spokespeople, and they've developed a system where when you go into an election, they decide between the two of them who is the leader and or who takes first chair, because of course our electoral system only allows for a single leader, a single prime minister and deputies, and so we have to squeeze into that model. But of course, that's only after we would actually be elected as co-leaders, after the party's constitution has been changed. Before the party's constitution has been changed, one of us will be the leader and one will be the deputy leader as per our party's constitution. But Chad and I have committed that even within that structure, we are going to work with each other as if co-leaders and really make sure that there is consensus between the two of us on every critical decision. And we'll be able to decide between the two of us, will one of us focus more on external spokespersonship and one of us focus more on internal party organizing and structuring, fundraising. We can sort of divide responsibilities according to skill and interest. But I'm glad that the person who asked the question is enthusiastic about the model.
Yeah, amazing questions. Next question. With climate change, such an important issue, is the Green Party being arrogant by rejecting carbon neutral game changers such as nuclear energy, biofuels, and green hydrogen? Do you believe that we should open up discussion, look at both sides, and debate the issue?
Great question. I'm always open for debate and engagement and looking at issues from all directions. And if members want to do that at a general meeting, I support them having that discussion. That being said, I've worked in the climate and energy space for a long time. I have a degree in physics. I studied the physics of radioactivity at university. I tutored engineering classes. We talked about nuclear power. I actually used to be pro-nuclear myself, but the more I have learned about nuclear energy, the more that I have become initially just concerned about it. And then over time, I have become more and more opposed. And that is because whilst, and it always bothers me when people cast an anti-nuclear position as being anti-science. I used to work with the chief scientist at Greenpeace, and he always said, look, science is just a way to describe the world. Science just describes the technology or how the technology works, how the world can work. Science doesn't decide whether something is moral or not. So climate science tells us if you put this much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you're going to get these impacts. It's up to us as humans to decide how much impact we want. Likewise, science tells us this is how nuclear energy works. This is how radioactivity works. This is the impact of having radioactive waste in an environment on the ecosystem. And it's up to us to decide whether those impacts are moral. And I've seen Indigenous rights abuses at points of extraction in uranium mining around the world. I have seen negative environmental impacts in protected areas from radioactive leaching. I've seen extreme water use, including in France, where their rivers dried up because of climate change this year. And as a result, they had to shut down nuclear stations, which need a constant supply of fresh water for cooling. So in my mind, and then of course there's the infinite length of time that you need to store radioactivity into the future, the radioactive nuclear waste. And communities which are near proposed radioactive waste sites are not impressed. Green politics and green philosophy says that we will not create sacrifice zones. We will not sacrifice somebody's community or somebody's environment for the convenience of others. And therefore, I don't, I think that I do support our current policies, which is to not support government subsidies for nuclear energy. I also don't think that it's economic. There's a very, there's a lot of evidence that says if you've got $10 billion, it's better to invest it in solar and wind and battery storage, which are technologies that can work now, rather than investing it into new nuclear.
Wonderful, thank you. Next question. Do you consider yourself a socialist, a social democrat, or a pro-market progressive centrist?
I would not say I'm a pro-market progressive centrist. I would say I'm somewhere between a socialist and a social democrat. I'm also pro-innovation and pro-small business, but generally in today's political spectrum, description, calling yourself a pro-market centrist means that you're somehow an advocate for deregulation. And I see deregulated neoliberal capitalism as the source of many of our environmental and social crises over the last, it's really been since the 80s that we've had capitalism for 400 years, since the 1600s, but it's really been since the 80s that it's been the neoliberal economic model that's advocated for deregulation and free trade, and that dominant economic model has spread throughout all the countries of the world, not only being confined to sort of the Western countries. And associated with that model, you see environmental degradation, and you see increasing wealth inequality. Whereas if you do grow wealth, but you also grow wealth inequality, and it's sacrificing long-term sustainability. And now we are running up against a lot of the symptoms of that system. So there's no wonder that we have a climate crisis, an ecological crisis, a crisis in healthcare, a crisis in housing. Healthcare and housing are examples of sectors where the value of neoliberalism said, let's privatize, let's underinvest in public services, let's not have a strong role for government. And we're paying the price for that now. We had experts telling us 10 years ago and 15 years ago that we are going to get to a crisis unless something changes, and we did nothing. And now we're in a crisis and governments are struggling to react. But I believe that when I've lived in Europe, I've seen countries where they have strong social democratic policies in action. They have universal healthcare. They have nonprofit healthcare throughout the whole system. There's really strong investments in public housing. There's regulation for renters to make sure that rents can't go above a certain level. I think we need to protect people. We need to make sure that the economy is working for people rather than the other way around, as I said earlier. So yeah, I think socialist, social democrat, those labels feel pretty comfortable for me.
Awesome, wonderful. How do you see the conflict between an exponentially growing economy and sustainability being resolved?
Great question. We can only grow our economy in line with the physical limits of the earth if our economy is based on service and care rather than material extraction. And so the green economy, the vision of the green economy is one where people who do care work are valued much more highly than they are now, and where the industries that we're investing in are themselves sustainable. We know that if we just convert all of the private vehicles that we have in the world from combustion engines to electric vehicles, that we are still going to be using an unsustainable amount of resources. On a finite planet, we need to look at the way that we can invest in public services, public transport, make sure that we're moving away from the need for every individual to own a private vehicle, for example. So those sorts of choices where we're investing in public wealth rather than this individualized wealth model, I think that's where we get the greatest benefit, because that allows, certainly investing in public transport and decreasing the private vehicle sector is going to mean that the private vehicle sector contracts as a sector of our economy. But we also know that it creates greater equality between people, because public transport enables more people to succeed without owning a private vehicle, without investing their money into this specific sector, and then they can use their money for their own benefit if they have access to this really strong public service. So that's one example. But generally, I think Greens take the approach of investing in public wealth rather than setting up the rules of the game so that people are amassing more and more private and material consumption. We invest in community rather than individualism, and that's going to yield benefits for the sustainability of our economy, but also benefits for human well-being. I think never in human history have we been so disconnected from each other. I hear this from students and teachers of high school students all the time. There's an escalating mental health crisis in our kids, and that comes from this economy that is incredibly isolating and that tells people you have to succeed individually and you have to amass money and resources and material wealth individually. But if we can be happier with good public transport, if we can be happy with more dense apartments rather than cities that rely on suburban sprawl and everybody having their own mini mansion, we're going to be more environmentally sustainable. We're going to be better connected to each other. The amount of wealth in the community, or the physical material wealth of the community, may look smaller than we have today, but we're going to be better off.
Awesome. If elected, will you run for a seat at the first opportunity? If yes, where? If not, why?
Great question. Yeah, Chad and I have spoken about this already. If there were a by-election in another part of the country, I would personally not go and run in it. I would want to recruit a great local candidate, ideally someone who's deeply connected to that community. And the reason for that is because I'm deeply connected to my community in this riding of Molpec, where I've run twice and have been in the top 6 Green candidates in the country both times. And so I want to run here at the next opportunity. My son goes to school here. Our family is very established in this place. We're very connected to this community. Chad himself has a little bit more flexibility in, that he might be more mobile to go places, but neither of us would want to push out a strong local candidate to try to get ourselves elected. We want to build capacity across the country. If we end our term in leadership having got 12 Greens elected, and the 2 of us are not part of those 12 Greens, I'm still going to count that as a success of our term in leadership. And at that point, I would probably gracefully step out of the spotlight and allow there to be a new leadership contest between a new and larger caucus. But that being said, I think both Chad and I are very capable of winning our seats, especially in the communities where we've run before and done quite well.
Awesome. We have to focus our efforts. If you had to choose 2 or 3 actions, policies to focus on, what would they be?
Thank you. I agree. We do have to focus our efforts. We have 90 pages of policy. Our election platforms are immense. Like every party's election platform, it can run to 60 pages or 100 pages. I think the Conservatives platform was like 150 pages last election. And we can't focus on every area of that. To break through, we do need to commit to campaigns on issues and get critical mass behind those issues. I think the one great example of this is the work that Mike Morris has been doing in Parliament on the Canada Disability Benefit. He's focused his time on it. He's worked across party lines. He's got alignment from the NDP, the Conservatives, the Bloc, some Liberals as well, and has really said, 40% of people who are in poverty in this country are people with disabilities. They are currently not getting enough of a financial benefit. The rates have not increased with inflation. They are living in legislated poverty. It aligns very much with the work that Mike Schreiner has been doing on this issue in Ontario as well. And they are starting to see progress on those issues. They are increasing the cost of inaction from the government. I think that's very effective. So Chad and I have chosen 3 priority areas for our campaign. One is ambitious climate action, and we want to focus very much on municipal climate action. And municipalities are funded by the federal government and provincial governments, but one particular fund is the Canada Community Building Fund, and the Canadian Federation of Municipalities has been asking for this fund to be doubled for a number of years. That is part of our Green Party policy. There's a lot of good rationale behind it. Municipalities are where climate solutions live, particularly on transport. And it is transport that is one of the largest sectors of emissions in Canada that has not changed barely at all in the last 5 to 10 years. So public transport and active transport, if we fund our municipalities and put strong conditions on that funding from the federal level, we will start to achieve breakthroughs on emission reduction. And we have all these co-benefits economically of enabling people to choose not to own private vehicles, as I was talking about earlier. So that's one policy area. The second is democratic reform. We've got a number of democratic reform priorities, but proportional representation has to be key among them. I actually think the election of Pierre Poilievre opens opportunities for more Conservatives to consider supporting proportional representation. And the third area of priority for us is the well-being economy. And I think we have to see how the work that Mike is doing on the Canada Disability Benefit evolves, but we've got a number of policies within the idea of the wellbeing economy, and would like to pick or choose, one or two of those to focus on advancing.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. We're at 5:57, depending on how long. So how will you and Chad reestablish the financial sustainability of the Green Party?
Financial sustainability of the Green Party. This is a great question. I have seen some of our competitors saying that they're going to be the least cost to the party in terms of their personal salaries. But I think what is more important than the salary cost of a leader is how much money they can bring in through new inspiration and through giving party members hope again. And I believe that Chad and I are offering an ambitious, forward-looking, positive, progressive campaign that allows the narrative about this party to change. On November 19, we can choose to go forward. We can choose not to just turn over a new page in the book or to start a whole new chapter, but to start a whole new, a whole new book in the series of the Green Party, a new era of this party. And when we can do that and change the narrative, and we can show that renewal is starting from a whole new base, I think we can surprise people. I think we're going to attract donations again. People are going to feel like they can be confident investing in the party. And it's also through professionalism. If you look at the 6-month plan that we put out on our site, if you look at all of the information on our site, you'll see that we value professionalism and we value stability in governance very much. Both of us have a lot of board experience, and we know what good governance looks like, and we know what poor governance looks like. And if we can get our governance into line as a party, make sure that we're not having all of this dirty laundry aired in public all the time, but we're really clean, we're getting the basics right, I think that stability is key to having people feel like this is a party that is worth investing in. And when you make a donation to a party, it is an investment. People expect a political return on that investment, but they're not going to donate if they feel that they're on a sinking ship, or that the foundations are shaky, or that it's not something that they can have confidence in. So we're offering renewal, we're offering responsibility, we're offering ambitious results and high ambition. High ambition, imagination for where we can go. We're aiming for 60 high ambition campaigns, not just growing, one riding at a time, but we're aiming for transformation. I think that that's inspirational.
Totally inspirational. I think we can do one more question. So maybe one more question. Canadian politics in 2022 seems to have lost the former respect between parties. Do you feel that you can advance the green agenda in this difficult atmosphere?
Yes, I think we can. I always think, you can disagree, and you can disagree strongly, but you must do it respectfully. And you can people out when they are being disrespectful as well. It's hard to not get sucked into that sort of partisan politics sometimes, but that's another benefit of co-leadership. Chad and I are always pulling each other up to being our best selves, instead of letting each other slip into that sort of partisan bickering and attacks. And I think that with the rise of very divisive politics, like Pierre Poilievre is advancing, he's a populist. He's getting popular because he's tapping into what people are angry about, and people are right to feel angry. The economic system isn't working for a lot of people. A lot of people are feeling pretty hard done by, like they're struggling. They're finding it difficult to make ends meet with inflation, with housing prices. And when we ridicule Poilievre, we lose the ability to speak to all of those people who might not be the extreme right, white nationalists that are leading his movement, but all those people who are sort of interested in what he's saying and are just attracted towards somebody who feels like they're listening, feels like he is listening to them. So if people feel like they're being heard by Poilievre, they're going to go in that direction. If we ridicule them for feeling that way, we lose the ability to speak to them. But if we can show them, yes, you're right to feel this way, but the person who is leading you does not have the solutions. He has an approach that is actually going to make politics, make your life worse, that will make these problems worse. He's an open advocate for deregulated capitalism, for getting rid of environmental protections, for getting rid of land use planning, for getting rid of public institutions like the CBC. We need to have, I think change has to happen with care, not a wrecking ball. And if people have been following New Brunswick politics, they'll know where that phrase comes from today. Change has to be made with care, not a wrecking ball. And when we can demonstrate to people we hear them, we hear the problems that they're facing, and we have careful solutions, I think that's where Greens can excel. But yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the other parties are getting into this just very polarized war against each other. And if Greens can stand strong and have integrity, I think we will attract people who are looking for a new sort of politics that steps away from this toxicity. I'm sorry if my answers were long and I therefore didn't get to other questions in the chat. I'll note them down. And if anyone wants to follow up, you're welcome to get in contact via our website. We have a contact page on the website. You can ask questions there, and Chad or I will try to respond. And I'll say, je suis désolée de ne parler pas beaucoup le français ce soir parce que la question est arrivée en anglais, donc j'ai répondu en anglais aussi. Mais Chad et moi avons un événement complètement en français la semaine prochaine à Montréal. Et donc, je suis très contente d'exercer mon français là-bas. Merci.
Awesome, beautiful. Thank you so much, Anna. That was lovely. And I'll just remind everybody, we have 4 more town halls, 2 next week and 2 the following week. So make sure to register, and you could hear this and you can hear all the beautiful thoughts. I had so many times I wanted to quote you, Anna. That was so great. Have notes. I've been reading your updates about what Mother Nature has been doing on the East Coast and your fight, and so many prayers sent to you and your community continually. So many of us are thinking about you and sending love. So yeah, this was beautiful. And thank you, Gayla Kessler, and look forward to the next one. And Anna, thank you so much for all your words. Thank you. Everybody have a beautiful night.
Thank you everybody for being here with us. And if you'd like to check out our campaign, learn a little bit more about Chad and I and our approach, please do visit our website, get in contact. We have a tour coming up next week starting on Sunday. And you can find the information about that on our site. But probably the best thing to do is just to sign up for email updates on our website, and then you can get updates about where we're going to be over the next 4 or 5 weeks. And I wish everybody a lot of luck in making their decision about who they'll be voting for. So merci, and thank you very much, Rainbow Eyes, for hosting us tonight. Bye.
Awesome. Gayla Kessler, Anna. Thank you. Good night, everybody.